Today I thought I will start from right from the beginning as to how the plants came into being, and then it is like a story unfolding in front of us. So we'll see that. Only thing in this is when I do the presentation, I can't see you. That is the handicap we get during the Google Meet presentations. Because if I open another device at the same time to look at you, then that echo comes, and then it is not possible for you to hear me and for me to talk also. So it happens that I'm not able to see your expressions, I'm not able to see you. So just if you have any questions, you can in between ask me, and then we can continue. Okay, so now I will begin with the presentation part. Let me just start with it. Okay, so the topic that we have selected today, that is to begin, is the evolutionary history of plants. And this is in relation to our biodiversity project only. So you can see how diverse we get as we go ahead into the course of evolution. Also, biology subject is so vast, it is all encompassing. You name the branch and it is there in our biology. There is physics in it, there is chemistry in it, there is engineering in it, there is mechanics, there is dynamics, there is mathematics, statistics, there is medicine in it. It also has history, it has geography, it has geology. So name the branch and it is there in our biology subject. All other are specialized branches, but we have all the branches explaining. The plants explain all these aspects, different aspects which we study for different branches. So you can imagine, you can take one branch and find out the physics in our plants. You can take one branch, chemistry, and find the chemical composition of the different plants. All plants have different way of communicating with us. It will have medicinal property or it will have some poisonous property. Some or the other property is there with the plants which can be studied. So like that same thing with mathematics. There is mathematics in it, there is statistics in it. So we study from all aspects the plants and the diversity, the biodiversity which we see is showing us all these branches. So I told you that we are going to start right from the beginning. So the first point what is seen is that how did the earth get its ocean? Many people have debated. There are many theories explaining how the ocean was, that is how the earth got its ocean. Ocean, we know where the life originated. So we need to know how it is. There are many theories I told you, but nobody agrees with one another. What is the reason for that? The reason is mainly because there was no eyewitness. The people who are here arguing about it, explaining about it, exploring about it, they were not there. So actually what happened at that time is all speculation. Experiments are done, experiments are performed, and scientists are trying, all physicists, geologists, astronomers, all they're trying to explain how the earth got its ocean in the beginning. So we see how, and this is another one I wanted to tell you, that this which we are going to see today is one which was given by Rachel Carson, the mentalist who was who studied a lot on this, and she spoke to the physicists, she spoke to the geologists, geophysicists, and she came to the conclusion that what we will see ahead of this is that the new earth, when it was freshly formed from its parent sun, it got torn away from it. And when it got torn away from it, it was a ball of whirling gases. It was a full area of only gases. And these gases formed from the hot sun were intensely hot. And these then started rushing through the black spaces of the universe on a path and speed controlled by immense forces. We know it has a definite path, a definite orbit, how it moves around in the space, in the dark places of the space. So these whirling gases, the round structure, it started going around itself and around the sun. So rotation and revolution both were seen. In this process, in the rotation, in the revolution, gradually this flaming whirling gases, they cooled. And as they cooled, these gases started to liquefy. And the earth became a hot molten mass. So now it was in a liquid state and it was a hot molten mass. These gradually cooled, and so the materials of this mass eventually became sorted out. They sorted out according to their heaviness, according to their weight. The heaviest was in the center, the less heavy surrounding them, and the least heavy forming the outer rim. So this we see when it happened. Now, at present, this is the pattern which exists. Today also we see it in the same manner. The central sphere of molten iron, very hot as it was a billion years ago. That is as hot as when the earth was formed. So still it is there. In our earth, the central sphere is of molten iron and it is very hot. You must be knowing that some experiments were also performed to see how much heat was there in the center, but it was not very successful. After that, an intermediate sphere of semi-plastic basalt, the rock which we get from in the middle region, there is the semi-plastic basalt, which is a little in a crystalline form, which is seen, which can be converted into basalt, and a hard outer shell, which is relatively quite thin and composed of solid basalt and granite. So what we see on the surface of the earth is the basalt and the granite, which is formed from the igneous rock. The igneous rock which is formed from the lava, the volcanic eruptions that we see solidifies and forms these rocks. So what we see today's earth is having the central molten iron surrounded by semi-plastic basalt and then the basalt and the granite. Now this molten mass which was present in the earth, the gases had liquefied, the molten mass was there, and this molten mass was also subjected to tides. So there were tides in the new earth long before there was an ocean. We know in the ocean there are tides. It comes twice, where we see 6 hours of high tide and 6 hours of low tide. It is repeated continuously. So these tides were there in that molten mass also. And how they were there? They were in response to the pull of the sun. The molten liquids of the earth's whole surface rose in tides. These, that is the molten part, it rolled unhindered around the globe and only gradually slackened and diminished as the earthly shell cooled, congealed and hardened. So what we see, this molten mass was subjected to tide, where the sun's tidal pull was there, and the liquid of the earth, the molten mass, was getting pulled towards the sun area. Apparently, the force that created these greatest tides the earth has ever known was the force of resonance. This was called as force of resonance, where the oscillation of the molten mass and the sun's tide, when it comes in the same direction, the force of resonance develops, which is tremendous. So for at this time, the period, the frequency of the solar tides had come to approach then equal the period of free oscillations of the liquid earth. Remember, it is a molten mass and it is subjected to the sun's pull. So the liquid earth, the oscillation of it, when it came towards the sun, the momentum was so high that a little of it got torn away from it. So this was happening every day, twice daily, and the earlier tide was larger than the one which was earlier to it. So here then what we see, the physicists have calculated that after 500 years of such monstrous, steadily increasing tides, those on the side towards the sun became too high for stability, and a great wave got torn away and was hurled into the space. So what is seen? This, what was hurled into the space, was then called as the moon. So this, what was hurled away, immediately it became the satellite, the newly created satellite, and it was subjected to physical laws that sent it spinning in an orbit of its own about the earth. So the moon also was subjected to these physical laws, and the moon was born. And what was said about it, that the crater which was created, the huge, the deep crater which was created because of this hurling of the molten mass into the space, the Pacific Ocean was formed. The big, huge Pacific Ocean was formed. And also it was seen that the base of the Pacific Ocean is having basalt and not granite, which is seen for the other oceans and other seas on the earth. Pacific has the basalt as its base, where the moon has granite on the outside. So that it is thought that this formed the moon, which was coming from the earth when the earth was gradually solidifying. Molten mass was there, but still the congealing was taking place, the formation was taking place, the hardening was taking place, where because the earth was cooling gradually in its rotation and in its revolution. So then what we see, this gradually cooling earth was enveloped in heavy layers of cloud, which contained much of the water of the new planet. So till that time, there was no water. Remember, we are here because of water. Water is our life. Did anyone say anything? Shall I continue? Yes? Someone tell me, shall I continue or?
मॅडम कंटिन्यू. आम्हाला जर थांबवायचं असेल तुम्हाला तर थांबवतो.
ओके.
टिल वी डिस्टर्ब यू कंटिन्यू. काय होतं माहितीये का, की ते प्लस मायनस हे जे असतं खाली स्पीकर आणि ते खाली जातं पटकन.
I know. I thought someone said something, that's why I asked. Okay, it's okay. So heavy layers of clouds which contained much of the water of the new planet. So water, the essential part because of which we live on this planet, was seen in these heavy layers of clouds. For a long time, its surface was hot, that no moisture could fall without immediately being reconverted into steam. So it was so hot that if the water droplets fell down, it would be again converted to steam. This dense perpetually renewed cloud covering must have been thick enough that no rays of sunlight could penetrate it. It was all dark on this earth. As soon as the earth's crust cooled enough, the rains began to fall. Never have been such rains since that time. They fell continuously day and night, days passing into months, months into years, into centuries. So you can imagine how much it rained, how much of the water came to our planet through these heavy clouds which were covering the earth. They poured into the waiting ocean basins or falling upon the continental masses, drained away to become sea. So the rains were so heavy that the continental masses, the solidified masses, also got broken up, also got shattered, and they were drained away to become sea. The shallow basins were formed because of that, and that water was filling in it. And initially, the water was not so salty. Gradually, as the cooling continued, these parts, some of the mountains were formed. These mountains also got degenerated, and all the contents of the mountains, the contents of the rocks of the mountains, that was added to the water, and gradually the water became saline. So now we know the ocean water, the sea water is saline, which became later. Initially, it was just rainwater which was getting collected into these basins. And as we know, the Pacific Ocean is the biggest. So now this continued, and then we have the chemical evolution. So this primitive earth contained a large amount of hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, and oxygen. See, all these gases we need. We need them in the salt forms. We need them in the compound forms. So they were there right from the primitive earth, where we see the most active of it was hydrogen. It combined with nitrogen to form ammonia. This I'm telling you in the beginning part, where the conditions were favorable for this type of combination. It combined with nitrogen to form ammonia, with oxygen to form water, and with carbon to form methane. As the temperature was high, ammonia and methane remained as gases and water as steam. So these were in the gaseous form only that we saw in the heated conditions. So after cooling, the water condensed. Water condensed, it became liquid. From the steam, it became liquid. And in that, the ammonia and methane got dissolved. And this was all taken to the seas and the oceans. So what we see, the hydrogen, which is the most active one, it combined with nitrogen, forming ammonia, with oxygen forming water, and with carbon forming methane. And all these are the, what we see, the hydrocarbons and the basis of the protein molecule. So then what we see, further what happened? I told you it is like a story happening. So we see what happened in the further step. In this, there were formation of complex molecules. All these compounds which came, the ammonia, the hydrocarbons which came into the water, they also got the energy from the surrounding. They were influenced by the energy sources which were available from the outside, such as the UV rays, ultraviolet rays, the radiations coming from the sun. The lightning was there, thundering was there, because the clouds were very heavy, and the lightning was a continuous process which was taking place. And there were volcanic activities because the earth was still in the stage of formation. It was still hot. So at various places, the volcanic activities were there. And with these, all these energy sources which were available and the conditions being hot of the molten mass, the early molecules of hydrocarbons, ammonia, and water showed further reactions. You must be familiar with these terms: the condensation, polymerization, oxidation, and reduction reactions. So these compounds, they came together they formed complex molecules. They condensed, they were joined together, they were oxidized, where the electrons were removed, they were reduced, where the electrons were added. So this, we see the various processes, the various chemical reactions took place in the sea with the help of this energy source which was available. And this was happening in the beginning. Remember, it is of the primitive earth we are talking. Now, this all congregation of the chemical compounds resulted in the formation of biomolecules. You know, biomolecules are the one of which we are made up of. We, I am saying, that is all living beings, right from the virus to the mammal and the higher plants, the angiosperms, all need these biomolecules. So biologically important molecules were formed, like the monosaccharides, the sugar, the amino acids that form the proteins, the fatty acids and glycerol which form the lipids, and the purines and the pyrimidines. These form the most important molecule of our nucleus, of our body, of our cell, that is the DNA and RNA. So what we see, formation of RNA and DNA was again a landmark in the progress of life. Simple organic substances came together in increasing numbers. See, the oceans are very large, the seas are very large. And in this, in increasing numbers, they came together. They collided, reacted, aggregated, forming new complex molecules. The monosaccharides, they form the polysaccharides. The fatty acids and glycerol form the fats. The amino acid aggregated to form proteins. The nucleosides aggregated to form nucleotides, which form the nucleic acids. So this we see formation of nucleic acid by the aggregation of phosphoric acid, sugar, purines and pyrimidines forming nucleotides. These form the RNA and DNA, which is the ribose nucleic acid having the pentose sugar ribose, and the deoxyribose nucleic acid having the deoxyribose pentose sugar. So this we see RNA is the genetic material in many viruses. Now that we see coronavirus, it is having this RNA as its genetic material, while higher organisms, animals, they have DNA as the genetic material. And the formation of protein molecules is considered as a landmark in the origin of life. So here, this DNA molecule, it can duplicate, it can replicate, it can reproduce. And what is reproduction? Reproduction is forming a structure similar to oneself. Then only it is called as reproduction. So here we see the formation, the DNA molecule, which gives the orders, which gives the messages to form the protein molecule, because of which we have our genes, because of which we have our features. All the adaptations and all are dependent on this. So this is the landmark formation of RNA and DNA. RNA was formed earlier. Then RNA is very unstable. Being a single-stranded molecule, it is very unstable. The DNA was formed, that is earlier, and this DNA is found to be stable. It doesn't change immediately. RNA mutates very fast because of the single strand, and the nitrogenous bases which are present on it get changed, move their positions very quickly. That cannot be, that is not happening in the DNA because of the double-stranded nature, which holds the two strands together and the nitrogenous bases together. So this we see is the landmark for the origin of life. Then what we see further? Life originated in water. At that time, there was no ozone layer. Remember, for us, there was so much debate that the ozone layer is getting depleted. There is the CFCs are destroying it. Then there is a hole in the ozone layer at the Antarctica end. So all this, we see that ozone layer is important to protect us from the UV rays. So at that time, there was no molecular oxygen in the atmosphere. It was in a bounded form. It was in a bounded form in that of the hydrocarbons and in that of the water. So at that time, there was no ozone layer also to protect us or to protect life. We were not there, but still the part of us was there, the life from UV rays. The life originated in water. So the water column on the top was a protective layer. So UV rays did not penetrate into the inner side of the water. So the organisms were deep inside water, protecting from the harmful effect of the ultraviolet rays. The initial life was anaerobic. Why we mention this? Because there was no free molecular oxygen. It was anaerobic, without oxygen. As we see for the bacteria, it can respire without oxygen. We call them as anaerobes. Many of the microorganisms, we call them as anaerobes. The fungi, they are the anaerobes. They don't need molecular oxygen like us. So here, this molecular oxygen was first obtained by the plants, not plants, we cannot say them plants as such, but they were the algae, the blue-green algae. Now they have been classified as cyanobacteria. Now cyanobacteria, the name is given because most of the characters are like a bacterium. The nucleus is not well organized and the cell organelles also are not so well developed, which are seen in the higher cells or higher plants. And the pigment is there in it, the phycocyanin pigment is there in it, which helps in photosynthesis and the release of oxygen. So the plants we need for energy because they are able to trap the solar energy. And one more point, that is oxygen. The oxygen which we need for respiration is available by these plants only. So this oxygen which is needed for our respiration process, for our, if you know the process, we have the glycolysis and the Krebs cycle. The final step is oxygen getting, that is taking up the hydrogen, which is bringing the energy to zero. So this we see oxygen is most important or the cell will burn up and die. And this oxygen became available by these cyanobacteria. Earlier they were classified as the blue-green algae because they were in the water. But we see the cyanobacteria, you can get them also in dry areas where they thrive well. So now what we see? Soon life migrated towards land. It was there in the water, and when oxygen came, ozone layer got formed and the life migrated towards land. And then the progress was in leaps and bounds, it is said. Why? Because there was no competition. The land was barren. Nothing was there on the land. It was all bleak and dark. So the life came towards the land and it was progressing in leaps and bounds, trying to conquer all the parts of the continents coming from the sea. But how it is with us? All of us, we do carry the wealth of the sea in our protoplasm and in our blood, as its composition is same. So we have come from the sea. Our origin is in the sea. Our ancestors were in the sea. And that wealth of the sea we carry because in our protoplasm, we have potassium, we have calcium, we have sodium, we have phosphorus in various salts which are seen, and the composition and the blood also we have all this, and the composition is almost same like that of the sea water. So that wealth of the sea we are carrying in us, that we have to remember. In us, again I am saying, it is also there in the plants, where in the protoplasm the same chemical, the same minerals are needed, which the quantity may vary depending on the position in the plant, but it is needed by all. So now we come to the evolution part further. Now here we can see this chart. Many of you might be familiar with this. We will go through this, see how it is. The first part, the first column is the era. The second column is the period. The third column is the epoch. Then the years in million of years ago, it is all, remember, the years with the numbers which are given is millions of years ago. And then the events that took place in the history of life. So life is originated in water. By the chemical evolution, the cells were formed. Again, as I said, it is not so simple. If you take each part of it, it's a big, vast research topic. A number of PhDs will be there on that single part. So that you can see, we are just trying to see ahead how from the primitive earth we are going towards the land plants. So here in the beginning, we have the Precambrian. In the Precambrian, we get that is fossils, etc. were not there, and the cyanobacteria started having the photosynthesis, and oxygen started accumulating. In this place, oldest eukaryotic fossils were obtained, and the origin of first animals were there. That is the eukaryotic cell, the single cell which is the protozoan which is seen, that was formed in this period. Precambrian, late Precambrian, that is just before the Cambrian. Then comes the Paleozoic. Paleozoic, you will see, has the Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, and Carboniferous. Now, this Carboniferous is very important, where most of the plants were growing, the vascular plants were growing luxuriously. So, what is seen in the Cambrian, there was the origin of the invertebrate phyla, most of the invertebrate phyla. We know there are 9 phyla, invertebrate phyla. So, most of them were originated in the Cambrian. At that same time, algae also started developing, and there were diverse algae, different types of algae are there. Now also, if you take just one drop of water from the, you can take it from the pond, from the lake, from the ocean, in that single drop, you will see numerous of them floating about. So that these diverse algae, that is the beginning of the Cambrian, they were seen forming. Then comes the further part of the invertebrate, the jawless vertebrates were formed. And at that time, the number of algae in the marine condition was abundant. So diversity was there. See how the biodiversity that we are talking, how it is coming in every part. Now, also look at the years. We have the 505 and then 438. So how much time it took for this formation? It is not that today it is one and the other day we got the other thing. It is not like that. After passing millions of years in between, then we get the new structure or the new formation. So this we see in the Ordovician, there were the jawless vertebrates and the marine algae became abundant. Then in the Silurian, diversity of jawless vertebrates. So number increased, diversity increased. A number of other adaptations were there. And we see that the colonization of land by plants and arthropods, origin of the vascular plants. So Silurian was the period in the Paleozoic where the vascular plants developed. We'll talk about it a little later again. In the Devonian, there was diversification of bony fishes. See, the jawless then got diversified to bony. Look at the period 408 to 360. First amphibians and the insects. So first amphibians were formed, the bony fishes, and the first amphibians, the animals that live partially in water and partially on the land. So amphibians started developing in the Devonian. Again, diversity, biodiversity. Then comes the Carboniferous, 360 to 286. Here in the Carboniferous, there were extensive forests, a big dense forest of vascular plants. At the same time, the first seed plants also developed. The first seed plants, that means the gymnosperms. The plants which do not have flowers, but the seed formation is there, that started in Carboniferous. Origin of reptiles, we know the further group. the reptiles, after the amphibians, we have the reptiles that came, but the amphibians became dominant. That happened in Carboniferous. In the Permian, radiation of reptiles, number of reptiles were there. The diversification of there was there. A large biodiversity was seen, and the origins of mammal took place. Like reptiles and most modern orders of insects, the extinction of many marine invertebrates took place. So as it is going further, what is happening? The earth is cooling further and further. And sometime it so happened that this condition, the changing condition, was not favorable to the animals, the plants that lived in the earlier stages, that lived in the Silurian, that lived in the Ordovician. So the extinction took place. Now also you will see suddenly one of the animal is seen somewhere around the globe, and then it comes as a news that this was thought to be extinct. It was millions of years back. It was in the primitive condition, and now it is formed. But then it is seen that adaptations are there which make the organism, the plants as well as the animals, to remain in that condition. They remain dormant, they remain in a sleeping condition, but become active when their conditions, when the surrounding conditions are favorable to them. So this we see, some of them got extinct, which are the invertebrates. The earlier invertebrates, the first form were the invertebrates. So they got extinct. Not all, remember, not all, some of them, and also we can get them back. So here with the Permian, the Paleozoic comes to an end, and the most important again comes the Mesozoic. Mesozoic has three periods: the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. All of you are very familiar with the Jurassic Park, where the dinosaurs were the dominant one. So what happened in Triassic? The gymnosperms dominated. They came earlier in Carboniferous and they dominated in the Triassic. And at that time, the first dinosaurs came and few of the mammals came. Then see the gap again, 245 to 208, where we see the 208 to 144, where we see the Jurassic. Gymnosperms continue to dominate and the dinosaurs also dominate. At the same time, animals took to air. They went into the ocean of the air and the birds were formed. The first birds were formed. From the reptiles, we see the further development. Then came the Cretaceous, which is important to us as we see now. The flowering plants appear. The dinosaurs and many groups of organisms became extinct. We know suddenly the extinction was there. Again, there are a lot of theories about the extinction, which is not very agreeable to many of them. But then it happened in Cretaceous, where the flowering plants appear and the dinosaurs got extinct. Then we come to the recent era. The recent era is Cenozoic, in which we are now presently present. The tertiary and the quaternary are the periods that we see here. And here we get the epochs. The epochs, again, you will see the number of years, million of years, is getting lesser. So see the development, how it is taking place. Earlier, look at that is the number of years that were there in between. And in the tertiary, you will see 65, 57, 34. So that very soon, very fast, the development took place, where the recent ones that we see is that is after the Ice Age. We got the human appearance and the angiosperms dominating the land. So here, all these are there with us. Some are extinct, some are still living, but all of them are there in the ocean as well as on the land. According to the adaptations, according to their, our earth is a round globe. So the sun's rays are not uniformly coming to the earth. On the equator, it is hottest, and at the poles, the rays are slanting. So it doesn't have much heat, so that the conditions are very cold. They are frozen. So here, accordingly, Then we see the animals, how they migrate, how they live there, how they adapted themselves. Same we can say about mangroves. Mangroves are the land plants actually, which got pushed towards the water. They got pushed towards the creek area. And then they needed to have those adaptations, which was a change in their genetic makeup. Then only they could get all those adaptations favorable for them to live in those harsh environments. So that we see this chart, which gives us how the diversity took place, how it started, and how it is coming to, I'm not saying end, because we are continuing. So now what we see further, geologists think that during the late Paleozoic, which was called as the Coal Age, and persisting in the Mesozoic, there was a vast continent. Are you familiar with the term Gondwana? It was called as the Gondwana land. That is in the late Paleozoic and the Mesozoic. See, remember, the continents were still being formed. There were tectonic plates which were shifting. So there were mountains rising, there were the continents getting submerged. So a lot of changes were occurring, which were taking place. Now also this is continuing, but at that time it was at a greater speed that was seen, it was happening. So geologists think that there was a vast continent which was called as Gondwana. And in this Gondwana, what was there? Which countries were there? Australia, our India was there, Africa, South America, and Antarctica. Look at this. All the southern side was there in this Gondwana. And this Gondwana, why it was called Gondwana? Because of the tribal people over there, the Gonds or the Gondia, you know, we have in Madhya Pradesh, Gondia. So Madhya Pradesh is an area which was there in the Gondwan land. In India, we have till Telangana. Maharashtra also is a part of Gondwana land. So this was there at that time, and you can imagine then, see the countries, Australia, India, Africa, South America, Antarctica, all was called Gondwana. So everyone must be having that tribe, which is that of the Gond people. So again, diversity is there, but migration was there at that time only. So here we see this. Now see this chart. You will notice this. What is the period we are seeing? It is a late Jurassic. In the late Jurassic period, that is 152 million years ago, you will see this Gondwana area. Can you see this Gondwana area? This all is having, as I mentioned, the South America. The North America is on the top, which is in Laurasia. Laurasia is the North America, Europe, and Asia. While we are down in this, in the Gondwan area, where it is South America, Africa, India, Australia. New Zealand is not seen in this. We are having this Antarctica. Now look at India. At that time, India was still the Deccan Plateau only. The Himalayan ranges were not seen in this at that time. And look at the sea which was there. This is called as the Tethys Ocean, where now also it is seen that many of the pollen grains and many of the seeds from the plants of India are seen in the fossilized form in this Laurasia region. Why? Because in this Tethys Ocean, because of this Tethys Ocean, they fell into the water and they were carried by the tide to the different countries and different continents. So we can see that scientists wondered, how come pollen grain from India tree is coming here? How come the seeds from India are coming here? But that is the reason, because this Tethys Sea was there and the Himalayan ranges were not seen at that time, and India was still the Deccan Plateau only. And see here, now it is in, we are linked with Asia, but at that time it was here along with the Gondwan area. And this Gondwan area is very important from point of view of fossils, because it was having dense forests, especially in the Carboniferous era. There were in the Carboniferous period, in the Mesozoic era, what we see, the forests were very dense. And because of dense forest, the animals also, the fauna was also very rich. So this fossils we get in this area mostly in this Gondwan area, the fossils are formed. If you are studying in the paleontology, again, as I said, you name the branch and it is there in this. So if we see the fossil formation, you will get mostly in this area, which is that of the Gondwan area. So that is in the late Jurassic, which is 152 million years ago. And then in the latest Cretaceous, that is 69.4 million years ago from today it is, what we see, there was a drift. The continents drifted because of the tectonic movement of the plates underneath. There were ridges formed, there were depressions formed, and then we see one more thing here to notice. Between the North America and the South America, you will get the Central Atlantic Ocean. That Atlantic Ocean was so tiny, look at it. It was just in the middle of these two countries, the Gondwana and that of the North America. Now you will see the later part which is showing, you get the South Atlantic Ocean, the North Atlantic Ocean, the North America, South America got separated, Africa got separated, India got separated, and the countries here down you will see Australia closer to Antarctica. Still, if you go to Australia, you will get all the expeditions which are going on for Antarctica. Everything is explained from Australia, it is taken to Antarctica. So here on this side, you will see the Pacific Ocean, the huge one, which is there completely surrounding here. And this side, we get the Indian Ocean. We have our Indian Ocean. So here, the Indian continent, the peninsular continent, it got shifted very fast and got linked with that of the Asian countries. So you can see how diversity took place because of these movements also. There was a lot of biodiversity and migration. Earlier being together, some of the fossils are there from the African part, which are seen now, we get in India also. So that again, I think in that movie, Guide movie, that person is an archaeologist. So that Madhya Pradesh shooting was taken where most of the fossils are formed. Actually, it is not shown any fossil, but the excavations which are done, that was shown in that area, the movie. Okay, so now we see the next part. This was 200 million years ago this happened, where the upper part we have Laurasia. What is there in Laurasia? The North America, Europe, Asia, and Gondwana, as I told you, the 5 countries which we have. See, it is below the equator and above the equator. So again, the climate varies, and accordingly, the flora and the fauna also varies, diversity. So that we see here. And then now Tethys Sea we do not get, because that place is all taken up by the Indian Ocean and the continents have encroached upon it. Okay, so now we come to the further part of the plant evolution. Now we are not talking about any animals, any zoological, please excuse. So now plant evolution, that is, we see Proterozoic, that is in the beginning, which came in the Precambrian. There was green algal evolution. Then in the mid-Paleozoic came the first land plants. Then in the late Paleozoic came the coal forests, the earlier vascular plants. Later Paleozoic came the seed plants and the gymnosperms. That is the early gymnosperms. Mesozoic, gymnosperms and reptiles dominant. Late Mesozoic, first flowering plants. And Cenozoic, co-evolution of flowering plants and insect pollinators, which is very important for the plants. Without insects, the plants cannot survive. The plants need the insects for pollination, without which seed formation will not be there, fruit formation will not be there. So it is seen that there was a co-evolution The co-evolution took place between insect pollinators. Look at the word pollinators. It is not just insect. It is insect pollinators which were formed, which were evolved along with the flowering plants, so that flowering plants were benefited. So this evolution of flower and fruit took place once the flowering plants were there, the co-evolution was there, flowering and the flowers and fruits were formed. So in the first fossils, in the late Jurassic period of Mesozoic area, the fossils are obtained of the flowers and the fruits. This diversified during Cenozoic and the co-evolution with pollinators. So now what we see? The course of evolution may be traced with reference to different plant groups that exist today and those which are definitely known to have existed in the ancient days. So today, and we relate them to the primitive earth. We relate them to the earlier days when the life originated. But because all these organisms, all these cells, all these animals or plants, they were soft bodied. So the picture is very hazy. Why hazy? Again, there were no eyewitness here, and also fossil formation was not there. Also remember, because of the changes in the temperature, the rock formation also was varying. Will be there in the further part. So it is almost impossible to make a correct estimate of the ages of the rocks in terms of the years. Different estimates are made which vary. One such estimate puts the total age of all the rocks under survey as about 3,000 million years ago. The first 1500 million years of this is covered by crystalline rocks, which formed the original surface of the earth when it first cooled. These rocks do not contain any living remains and are called azoic. Azoic, that is lifeless. No life was formed at that time because the formation was taking place. It was in the process of chemical evolution. So life as such was not formed, but it was in the process of forming. Next comes the Archaeozoic, which is called as the primitive life, where these rocks are called as the Archaeozoic rocks. The latter name is significant because evidences are accumulating that life did exist even in those very ancient days. So now again, as I said, in the excavations and in all the processes, in all the studies which are done, somewhere or the other, at the bottom of the sea, at the bottom of the ocean, everywhere man has encroached due to his curiosity to know how, where, what, when. We have all those questions in our mind. And because of that, now many evidences are being accumulating that life did exist in those primitive days also. So there was some form of primordial life out of which arose bacteria. The schizomycetes, the bacteria are still there. We know some are the harmful one, which are pathogenic, some are useful, non-pathogenic. Without bacteria, we cannot survive. Bacteria are needed in our gut. They are needed in various parts of our body, which perform various functions which are necessary for our physiological activities. So bacteria were formed, primordial life it is. Remember, the life formed earlier. Then came the slime molds, Myxomycetes. These slime molds are like slimy, like a blob of mucus. When food is abundant, they are single. But when the food becomes scarce, they aggregate together. The white mushy structure which we see on the rotting fruits, etc., that is the slime mold. These don't have any structure as such if you observe at them, but just a mass which is living. It reproduces, it forms spores. Like the fungi, it forms spores. So these slime molds were formed. These are towards land. Also in water they are formed, which come on the organisms which die in the water part. Then the blue-green algae, the cyanophyta, that was very important, which was giving the molecular oxygen. As I said, it was not there earlier. This molecular oxygen is essential So this came from this blue-green algae, the cyanophyta. Then came the flagellates. The flagellates are very important because it is an interesting group of unicellular naked organisms. Why we call them naked? They did not have a covering, a firm plasma membrane or firm cell wall was not there. They were just unicellular structure organisms which moved about in water, and out of which came the true algae. So true algae arose from these flagellates. Now these flagellates, they gave rise to different the divisions or different classes of the plant kingdom. We have the Bacillariophyta, where the diatoms are there. We get the pinnate diatoms, the centric diatoms, and remember, these diatoms are the food of flamingos. The flamingos you must have seen shifting in the water with their beaks, the curved large beak shifting. They shift for these diatoms, and these give them that color. The color which comes is depending upon the diatoms, the pigments which they take in, and with their nourishing, that is the nutrition which they acquire. So the flagellates, I'm saying because the flagellum is a locomotory organ. The flagellum is a locomotory organ. Generally, a single one is there. We will see in the picture further. So out of these different types, the diatoms came, which is Bacillariophyta. The brown alga came, called as Phaeophyta. The red alga came, Rhodophyta. And the green alga came, Chlorophyta. So what is in brown alga? Why brown alga? Because the carotenoids were more in number, which masked over the chlorophyll. So chlorophyll was there, but the quantity was less as compared to the carotenoids. In the red algae, similarly, the red pigment was there, which masked over the chlorophyll. That is why the color looks red. And the green algae, we have the Chlorophyta, that is having chlorophyll dominant. Now this will look at some pictures which are showing us these organisms, the primitive ones. The first one is the bacterium. You can see the bacterium, which is rod shaped here, the bacillus one in this picture. We have the cocci, the bacilli, the spirili. Different are there depending upon their shapes, they are classified. So here we are seeing the rod shape, the bacillus ones, the bacterium. The bacterium survives in any condition because of its covering. The covering is having the compound called as peptidoglycan, which is heat resistant. So they survive in adverse conditions also. And the multiplication is very fast. Being a small organism, it has a single chromosome and single DNA molecule, which multiplies at a very fast rate. So the rate of growth is very fast. Then next we see the slide of slime mold. Aggregation is there. You will see them, white base is there, aggregation is there, where the fruiting body is formed like that of a fungi. Then these are the important plant aggregates, again symbiotic plants. One you see on the rock surface, the crustose lichen which is coming together of the algae and the fungi, both helping one another. The algae, they trap the solar energy. Remember, our food chain begins with the source. So always there has to be source which gives us the energy. We are not able to convert it, but the plants convert this solar energy. So it begins with the source, then it comes to the producers. So producers take up this solar energy and prepare the food material. So here the algae do that function of preparing the food material, and the fungi, they help to that is attached to the rock. The rock surface is very hard. Nobody can come and have their roots in that. So these fungi which are there, they send the special type of roots called as the rhizoids or the rhizines they are called. They enter the rock, they secrete chemical compounds, and the rock gets broken into smaller particles. In the smaller particles, in the crevices which are formed, come the other organic matter and settle. So how these lichens are called as the pioneers. If you go to the forest, you will see such large boulders, large rocks, where you will see these lichens growing, which are the pioneers of vegetation on that rock. When the lichens break up the rock in this manner, then little organic matter is formed, and the grasses come and the grasses seeds there and germinate. Gradually, the grasses complete their life cycle, they die, adding to the organic material, and more of soil formation takes place, where the larger herbs will come and live there. You will see this distinctly if you go for excursions, if you go outside when you are doing photography and all. Try to see these landmarks, how it is. It is called a succession. By succession, the plants grow. So first we'll get the lichens, the pioneers, and then gradually this entire is converted into a climax. It is called as the climax forest, where the forest will be the end part, which will be dense. The forest will continue to live unless there is some accident. That is, for example, if it catches fire, etc. At that time, the forest might be destroyed. Otherwise, from the lichens, the pioneers, to the land trees, the bigger trees, the forest, we see succession of the plants growing, where the herbs come, then the shrubs come, then the trees come. In between, somewhere the climbers also lodge there, and they start growing. So you can see the importance of the lichen, and also it is said that the lichens indicate the air pollution. If the lichens are growing, thriving luxuriously, that means the air is pure, pollution is less, the chemicals in the air are less. So that the lichens are indicators. I have taken two pictures of lichen. The one which is on the rock surface here, and see this, I wanted to show you the colored one. Like this, you get beautiful colored lichens also. See the color, orange color, white color, just like painting it has come. So the center is orange, surrounded by white, then orange, and it will go on growing. The center is its growing point, and there it goes on in a circular manner. It will go on increasing, covering the entire surface till where it can reach and till where it can survive. Survival is very good for lichen. That way, there is no predator. But the reindeers like lichens. The reindeers, you know, in the cold condition in the Arctic region, the reindeers, they eat lichens, which is a rich food for them. So then these lichens, though we say they are just on the rocks, it is not like that. They are one of the component of the food chain also. So all this, remember, all this biodiversity which we see, it is a component of the food chain and the food web, where they are interacting with one another. Then the last one is the mold, that is the fungus. The fungus you will see here coming on a loaf of bread, the mucor which we see coming with the red, with the black sporangia which is seen here coming, colorless. It doesn't have any green pigment. So they are not able to produce food, that is, they are not autotrophic, they are heterotrophic. They are either saprophytic or they are parasitic. Saprophytic living on dead organic material, parasitic living on living material. So next, this picture is of the flagellates. The one here you will see the Chlamydomonas, which has the green cup-shaped chloroplast, and you see the Euglena here, which also has a chloroplast. These are having flagella. Euglena is having a single flagellum. Chlamydomonas is having two flagella. These are the locomotory organs. Remember, these are the most primitive algae which developed and which are still living. So that we see the how the development took place. Earlier it was single cell, and the classification, if you see, for the invertebrates, earlier it started with protozoa. But now that protozoa has been removed and all these single cells are put into protist. It is called as the protista, kingdom protista, where Chlamydomonas will be there, Euglena will be there, and amoeba also will be there. So all these, they are put into a single group because of their single cell condition. And here in the earlier part, remember, where we saw bacteria, where we saw the that is the diatoms, we'll see further, they don't have a well defined nucleus. But this Chlamydomonas and the Euglena, you will notice the nucleus is very well defined. It is having a nuclear membrane, and the genetic material, the DNA, is enclosed inside the nucleus. So they are called as the eukaryotes. The true nucleus develops in these cells. So now one more thing to see in this. Again, this is a picture of the flagellates, and we see this one. Now see, these are the that is the organisms when they formed, when they reproduced asexually. One more thing to remember is the earlier organisms all were haploid, having only one set of chromosome. And when they reproduced, they formed the haploid spores only. And these spores were motile. They were moving about. Look at this picture, the second one. They were motile, where the flagella were there and they could move about easily with that. When these spores were formed, sometime in the life of the alga, it so happens that the vigor becomes less. The activity becomes less, just like aging. The activities become less. And the zoospores which are formed, they become smaller and smaller in size. And they were not able to germinate. These only germinate and form the new plant. So the new alga or the new thallus. Thallus we get in the algae, which is the undifferentiated plant body. No roots, no stem, no leaves, like that. Thallus. So the thallus would be formed. But when the zoospore would become weak, it would not be able to germinate. So what was seen, again, it is that is mentioned like that when in their movement, they were just roaming about in the water. They were not able to germinate. So this accidentally, they happen to come together. And see how they happen to come together. It is by the narrow apical end. Let me get the arrow on it, 1 minute. See, here, they come there to their close proximity by the narrow end. Accidentally, this is happening, not purposely. This happened accidentally, where they came together. As the tips came together, the cell wall in between them, that got dissolved. And the nuclei, the two nuclei, they came together. The nuclei, see how the dissolving took place, and the nuclei came together and they united. This proved of advantage to the zoospore because the cytoplasm was rejuvenated and the nucleus also was rejuvenated and the zygote was formed. So this diploid condition was there, and this diploid condition was considered to be stable. So earlier, only asexual reproduction was there. In the earlier plants, only asexual reproduction was there in the water. Gradually, because of this accidental meeting and knowing that this is increasing the vigor, the sexual reproduction started. So gradually we see the development of the sexual reproduction where two individuals are needed. In asexual reproduction, only one is needed. While in the sexual reproduction, two organisms are needed, two cells are needed, which have to come together to rejuvenate the cell, which will be formed, which we call as the zygote, the diploid condition. So this, in the earlier primitive ones, this diploid nucleus would divide and give rise to haploid spores only. It would not give rise to diploid cells. It would undergo reduction division, it would undergo meiosis and give rise to haploid structures only. But that sexual reproduction has started. This is generally seen in the filament of Ulothrix. There is a alga, green alga called as Ulothrix. So that Ulothrix has this sexual reproduction seen with that of the zoospores. Spirogyra doesn't have this. In the Spirogyra, another alga, filamentous alga, a bridge is formed between two filaments and the cytoplasm is transferred from one cell to another. But this zoospore coming together and giving the beginning of the sexual reproduction was seen from Ulothrix. Then we see this sexual reproduction was made more and more specialized, where first both the gametes were of the same size, which is called as isogamous. Then was seen one small and one larger, which was called as anisogamy. And that smaller one was considered as the male strain and the larger one was considered as the female strain. And then we come to the latest part, that is the oogamous. In the oogamous, the female strain was large, spherical, having lot of food material accumulated, and the other one, the male strain, was small in size and having only the genetic material. So we see how sexual reproduction progressed from isogamy, anisogamy to oogamy, and now as we see it is established as the diploid condition. So here, when in the earlier stages, we call them as gametophytes. Only gametes are formed, gametophytes. As we come towards land, we see that the sporophyte generation, that is a diploid condition, will be little more persistent. Not like in the alga, not like in the water. In the water, it remains in a single cell stage. Immediately, it becomes haploid. But later, gradually, it came towards land and it became the, am I crossing the time? Let me finish with this slide. So here,
मॅडम तुम्ही अजून 5-10 मिनिटं कंटिन्यू करू शकता.
Yes, I will finish this slide because I have to tell about this slide. I want to show how the aggregation took place. So here, then this single cell structure, you will see it aggregated and formed colonies. There were colonies like Volvox. This is, we get Pandorina, where the cells have aggregated. So every cell in this colony, is independent. That is, it will have its own physiology, own photosynthesis, own nutrition. It will have its own respiration, and still it will remain with others. It will remain in a group. So colonies were formed. So it became a colonial form. Then it became more advanced, where it formed a aggregate structure. This is of the coleochaete. This coleochaete, now also we get a nice disc-like alga, very beautiful green color. The green color which is shown in this picture is actually seen under the microscope also. It looks very fluorescent, the coleochaete, where we see this. Then we get the brown alga on the side, that is the Dictyota and the Padina, which we see, where they are having the dichotomous structure, branching at the tip. You'll see always two branches will be there, which is called as dichotomy. Majority of them have it, which you will also see in the fucus. All these are marine alga, remember, these are marine. That is brown alga is marine, red alga is marine. Here you see the red alga, Gracilaria. Number of them are there, but still not as large as Chlorophyta. Chlorophyta number is larger than the Phaeophyta and the Rhodophyta. Then in the middle here, you are seeing the blue-green alga. This is the nostoc. You get the nostoc and the Anabina. You must have heard these names. These nostoc and Anabina, these are nitrogen fixing. They fix the atmospheric nitrogen, so that many times they are used in fertilizers, that is used as fertilizers in the rice fields. In the rice fields, where the water is flowing through the canals in between where the rice is planted. In that, these are added so that the nitrogen content of the soil increases. So these are taken for the space. In the space, you know, the big quantity of food material cannot be carried. So these alga, by the name spirulina. It is not there in this picture. Spirulina, which is rich in vitamin B. Here it is made into tablets so that it can be given. Even chlorella, which is a unicellular alga, it is made into tablets, and that is given as nourishment to the astronauts to be carried in the spacecraft. You know, in the spacecraft, because of low gravity, you cannot keep large quantities. So this, in a tiny but compact or the nutrient filled compact tablets are made, which are made from these spirulina and the chlorella alga. So a number of alga, again, here there is a lot of space for research to find out which one can be converted for the astronauts, because very soon we are going to the moon, we'll be going to the Mars. So that is going to happen in the near future, where all this will be in demand. So these algae can be explored for that reason. And the last picture is that of the diatoms. The diatoms, you will see the longer ones, the pinnate diatoms, the round ones, the centric diatoms. These are very beautiful, called as the jewels of the sea, because of the beautiful colors and the beautiful ornamentation. They have ornamentation on them. They have tiny pores, which are called as puncti. The punctis which are there on them, they give a pattern to it. And like a jewel box, it appears. So again, when you put it on the slide and see it under the microscope, you will see that they are very beautiful and rightly called as the jewels of the sea. So these we see. So shall I stop here?